Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
We're always looking at education here. And today we're tackling a question that I think you've probably thought about too. It's this idea of, can we teach kids to be more sustainable by teaching them to code?
It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Like using something as technical as coding to instill these bigger, social and environmental values. There's a great article that just came out that really digs into this. It's called "Can Coding Teach Children Sustainability and Good Values?"
And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Right.
I mean, at first you might think coding is just pure logic and problem solving, not exactly, touchy-feely stuff. But this article that we're going to be looking at today is arguing that coding can actually help kids grasp those really big concepts, like sustainability.
Yeah, if you think about it, imagine trying to explain something like an ecosystem to a kid. It's complex, there's so many moving parts. But with code, you could actually have them build a simulation and actually see how all of the different elements interact. They can even play around with it and see, what happens if we cut down all the trees.
So it's not just reading about it in a textbook. They're actually getting to build it, getting to see the consequences of different actions, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. And that hands-on experience can then lead to a deeper understanding of what we call systems thinking, right? Which is really, really crucial for understanding something like sustainability. And in coding, you learn really quickly that if you change one line of code, it can affect the whole program.
Oh, that's a great point.
It's like, in an ecosystem or even on a planetary scale.
Yeah, everything's connected. It really is.
Yeah.
It makes me think of all those coding projects that are out there where kids are actually designing apps to track their family's carbon footprint.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because what it does is it takes this abstract global issue and turns it into something that they can measure.
Totally.
They can visualize it, and they can even start to think of ways to actually reduce it, which is pretty amazing.
It is. And, often those projects involve some level of collaboration too, right? So they're working together towards a common goal, whether it's cleaning up a virtual park or building a sustainable city, in code. But ultimately what it does is it can foster this sense of, we're all in this together. We all share this responsibility.
But couldn't someone say that, even with all of these engaging projects that we're talking about, couldn't they say that coding itself isn't actually teaching values?
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, it's a tool, right? It's not a philosophy. So just because a kid can code a recycling app, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to turn into some environmental activist in real life, right?
You're absolutely right. And the article actually acknowledges that risk. And they call it superficial engagement. It's where we have to be really careful that the focus doesn't just become, oh, cool, I built this app,
Right.
without actually understanding the deeper issues that are at stake.
Right. And it seems like that risk of superficial engagement could be even greater when, a really complex issue gets kind of oversimplified in the coding project itself. So, for example, you could have a simulation that shows deforestation. It's like, okay, we just cut down trees. But it doesn't address the deeper economic factors that are actually driving it, or even, the whole complicated process of reforestation and all the nuances that come with that.
Exactly. So then the question becomes, how do we make sure that kids are really making those connections between the lines of code that they're writing and what that actually means in the real world?
Oh. And it seems like the role of the educator is super key here, right?
Yeah.
Like a good teacher is going to guide those discussions. They're going to challenge assumptions and help those students think critically about the limitations of any simulation, right?
Yeah.
Because every simulation is going to have limitations.
Yeah, I completely agree. But, even beyond the classroom setting, I think there's this bigger question of, can any digital tool, no matter how well designed, actually instill values like sustainability?
And that's really the heart of the debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there something about those real world experiences that just make them so much more powerful when it comes to shaping our values?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about, actually going out and planting trees, or even just, reducing waste at home, or, getting involved in some kind of community initiative.
Yeah, those are all great examples. And the article actually highlights that point. Values are often shaped by those lived experiences. So, it's one thing to, code a virtual garden on a computer.
Right.
But it's a whole other thing to actually get your hands dirty,
Yeah.
plant a seed in the ground, nurture it, and watch it grow. Oh, absolutely.
That build a different kind of connection.
It does. It's like, you could read about the rainforest in a book.
Yeah.
Learn all kinds of facts about it. But it's not the same as actually going and like hiking through the rainforest. Feeling the humidity, hearing the sounds, seeing all the amazing biodiversity firsthand.
Right.
That kind of creates this like visceral understanding that you just can't really get from a screen.
Exactly. And those real-world experiences, they often come with a sense of responsibility, too.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
if you plant a tree,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to care a lot more about protecting trees in general.
Right.
If you see pollution firsthand, you're probably going to be more likely to make choices that are, more sustainable.
Okay, so it sounds like real-world experiences are really, really crucial.
Yeah.
But does that mean that coding is like completely out of the picture when it comes to teaching kids about sustainability? Because the article did talk about some educational platforms that are actually combining coding with ethical themes. Yeah, they did. And that's where I think this idea of balance comes in.
Okay.
Coding can be a really powerful tool, but it works best when it's complementing those real-world experiences, not trying to replace them.
Okay.
So you've got platforms like Scratch Junior, for example,
Right.
where kids can create animations and games that actually explore environmental themes.
Oh, cool.
So they're expressing their understanding in this creative way.
So it's not just teaching them how to code, but also teaching them how to code for good.
Exactly. How to use those skills to actually create projects that have a positive impact.
Yeah.
And then you've got robotics kits like Kibo, which let kids actually build and program robots to perform different tasks. Imagine, a group of kids coding a robot to help out in a community garden.
Oh, wow.
Or to clean up a park. It's taking those virtual simulations that we talked about and bringing them into the real world.
Right.
They're not just, manipulating pixels on a screen. They're actually building something tangible, something that has the potential to make a difference. Well,
that's awesome. And it brings us back to that idea of, the educator and how important their role is in all of this.
Absolutely.
Because a good teacher can use all of these amazing coding tools to, spark curiosity, to guide discussions, to help kids connect those digital creations to the real world.
Yeah, and to ask those thought-provoking questions, right?
Yes.
Encourage critical thinking and make sure that the learning goes beyond just, can I write this line of code?
So it seems like it's about finding that sweet spot, where you can leverage the power of coding to engage kids.
Yeah.
To teach them those really valuable problem-solving skills, but then connect those experiences to, those real-world actions and a deeper understanding of what sustainability actually means.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not an either-or. It's both and.
I love that.
We need both. We need those hands-on experiences, and we need those digital tools.
Mm-hmm. And it's really cool to think about how they can work together. Well, I'm really glad we unpacked all of this today. It's definitely given me a much more nuanced perspective on how coding can actually play a role in shaping values.
Me too.
It's not the be-all, end-all solution, but it could be a really powerful piece of the puzzle.
I agree. And it brings up some important questions for all of us to think about, not just educators. As our world becomes increasingly shaped by technology.
Right.
How do we make sure that we're using these tools thoughtfully, intentionally,
to
actually create a more sustainable future?
And that's a great point. I think that's something that all of our listeners out there might want to ponder as well. This has been such a fascinating conversation, hasn't it? I mean, we've really dug into this whole idea of coding and how it can play a role in teaching kids about sustainability.
Yeah.
And it's not a simple answer, right?
No, definitely not. It's complex.
Yeah.
But, as we wrap up, I'd love for our listeners to kind of reflect on their own experiences for a minute. Think back to your own childhood. What role did hands-on learning versus, digital tools play in shaping your own values?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I think back to, growing up and spending my summers at my grandparents' farm and, helping out in the garden, learning about where food comes from. Those kind of experiences definitely shaped my views on sustainability.
Yeah, I can see that. For me, I remember, exploring the woods behind my house.
Nice.
Building forts, just observing nature. And, those kinds of experiences definitely instilled this sense of wonder and appreciation for the environment.
Yeah, totally. And it makes me think, too, that, it's not about choosing one over the other, right? Like, it's not hands-on learning or our digital tools. It's both.
Yeah, they both have a role to play.
And they both contribute to shaping our values in different ways.
Right. And, as we move into this increasingly digital world, it's even more important to be intentional about how we use these tools. How can we use technology to teach, those technical skills, but also to nurture, empathy, responsibility, connection to the real world?
Such good questions. And I really hope that this deep dive has given our listeners some food for thought today. We've explored the nuances, we've talked about the potential pitfalls, and we've also, looked at some really exciting possibilities of using coding to teach kids about sustainability.
Yeah. It's a complex topic. But,
Yeah.
ultimately, I think it's about empowering the next generation to be tech savvy, but also to be deeply committed to creating a more sustainable future.
I love that. Well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this thought-provoking journey. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.